Powerful statements, powerful questions. I love the Alpha Course because the Alpha Course is a space, a place for people to talk about those questions. I also love watching people watch the Alpha videos because everyone kind of just leans in. The room gets a little more quiet. Everyone's like, oh, that, yeah, I want to know. I want to know more about that. I want to talk more about that. And that is really what the Alpha Course is a place for people who are brand new to Christianity or maybe friends of yours who are in your neighborhood, who are at your school, who are at your campus, who have those questions, and we sit around and we have a talk about Christianity, we have a discussion, and we have food, which is the best of all that the church has to offer, right? Especially the food. So if you are here and you want to join the Alpha Course, you're welcome to. It's Monday night, started August 26th. And Hope, can you raise your hand for us? Hope Harris, everyone. She's our main facilitator for it. We were talking about doing it just for young adults, but we had many people say, I want to go into that. Or I have a friend of mine who's 35, they want to do it. And so we changed it. We're changing it that anybody can go any age at all. And so if you have a friend or someone who wants to join, please take the little invite card that you got today on your chair and invite somebody, give that to somebody, let them know they can register for it online or they can just show up. Even better, invite somebody and say, I'll go with you week 1 and sit next to you because it's intimidating walking into anything in church like everyone has experienced before. And I'll join you if you want to go with me. So that's the Alpha Course. Along with that, our groups are starting up next week. If you are not in a group of any kind yet, I want to encourage you to step into some kind of community in our church. This is awesome. This is wonderful. God's word is preached. We worship together like we experienced a little bit ago. But when we're in relationship with each other and people support you and know you, transformation really happens. So please, you can scan the QR code or go to friends.church/Eastvale to learn more about the men's groups, women's groups, couples groups, students groups, all those that are going on in the life of our church. Welcome to our church. Welcome to Friends. My name is Aaron, and I have the joy of serving as the pastor of our congregation. Good to have you with us today. If you have your Bibles, turn to 1 Kings chapter 18. That's where we're going to be at today, 1 Kings 18. And once again, if you are new, after service, we have this thing called the 7-minute hangout, which happens right in that corner there. It's just 7 minutes to put a face to the name, meet you. If you have a few minutes afterwards, we'd love to meet you afterwards and figure out how we can help you get to your next steps in our church and in your faith as well. So please join us for that. Sadly, the Olympics are over. And I don't know about you, but I spent hours in the evening the last couple of weeks watching the Olympics. And what never grew old was hearing our national anthem play and seeing the American flag go up and seeing an athlete from America on the top podium with the gold medal around their neck. Isn't that awesome? Anybody else get like goosebumps? Like no matter how often it happens, which happened a lot in the Olympics for us, I always get goosebumps. It's amazing. And those athletes, they gave years of their lives in order to be on that podium. The Bible oftentimes relates athletics and competition to our Christian faith. We're told to run the race. We're told to get the prize. But did you know that God is in a competition as well? That God is after a prize. And the competition is for your heart, and the prize is your worship. Now, somebody might think to themselves, why would the Lord need to win my worship? You know, we're all here on Sunday morning. We gather, like, why would he need to win my worship? I come to church on Sundays. I'm a blue-collared American. Like, I watch football at 1 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever. Like, I pay my taxes. Why would the Lord need to win my worship? For the person who doesn't know just how important your worship is to the Lord, or to the person who doesn't know how good worshiping God is for your soul, like I hope we just experienced right now. For the person who doesn't know the extent to which the Lord goes to chase after your worship. God gave us an incredible story. It's in 1 Kings 18. It's a story of God winning the worship of his people. And the story begins when King Ahab of Israel, the king of Israel, comes into contact, meets up, has a confrontation with the godly prophet Elijah. This is not a friendly meeting, just want you to know. This is a confrontation. It's a standoff, like an old Western. It's high noon and OK Corral, if you know that reference, okay? And here's what Ahab says in verse 17. When he saw Elijah, he said to him, "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" A chapter earlier, Israel had declared that a drought would come over all of Israel because of their sin. It was now year 3 of the drought. The crops had died. The land was desolate. It was dirty everywhere. People were getting worried. How would they pay their bills? This was an agricultural community. Ahab the king looked weak, pathetic. His leadership was being brought into question because he couldn't make it happen. He needed a solution to the problem. He needed a scapegoat. And the scapegoat was Elijah. You're the troubler. You're the reason. But Elijah steps up and he tells the truth. He says this back, verse 18, I have not made trouble for Israel, Elijah says, but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals. Ahab was a wicked man. 2 chapters earlier, we are told that Ahab did more evil in the sight of the Lord than any other king before him. And that's saying a lot. Some of Ahab's predecessors created some golden statues and said to Israel, bow down, these are your gods. And I think to myself, like, what could be more evil than that? Right? But apparently marrying Jezebel was. That name, Jezebel, it'll put some shivers in your spine. That is the most notorious female name in the whole Bible, Jezebel. And we're going to get more to her next week when we talk in chapter 19. But she was really the one in charge of Israel. Ahab was a puppet king, and because of her influence over Ahab, she helped Ahab lead all of Israel to worship this god, this false god, Baal. Now, if you grew up in the church, you probably have adopted the southern translation of that name, Baal, right? Give me some tea and Baal. You know that's a southern translation. It's really Baal. But for the sake of it, you can just continue on if you want to, calling it Baal. That's fine. But Baal was the god of fertility. And he was a sort of a convenience store god. Whatever you needed, whenever you wanted it, you just go to Baal. He gave the people wheat and crops, and he promised them rain. He promised them children if they needed kids. He gave Israel protection because all the other nations were also worshipers of Baal. He was said to be the god of thunder and lightning, and he asked the people to worship him. And when the people heard about all that he could give, money and control and security, who would give that up? All Baal asked for was their worship. And so Israel set up a temple on a mountain called Mount Carmel. It looked just like the one that was in Jerusalem for the Lord. It wasn't as big, obviously, it's a smaller mountain. But they worshiped Baal there. They did awful things in the name of Baal. And below that mountain was a valley, just like the Chino Valley. Beautiful valley, great soil in it, right? And called the Valley of Jezreel. And if we ever go to Israel as a church, we'll go there. It's an incredible place. And as they worshiped Baal, they looked at that valley and they wondered and hoped if Baal would provide for them crops and rain. Now, ironically, Israel hadn't abandoned worshiping the Lord. They also continued to worship God. They worshiped him in the temple in Jerusalem, but when they heard how good this would be for Baal, they adopted both. They were equal God employers, if you will. They wanted Yahweh, they wanted Baal. They wanted the blessing of both of them. And by doing so, they disobeyed the first command. The Lord had laid it out very, easily for them to grasp. A child could grasp the first command. Exodus 23, thou shalt not have any other gods before me. Monotheistic is what we call it. God said, I want to be the one and only in your heart. I want to get all of your worship. I just want your worship. But by adopting Baal into their worship, they left being monotheistic and they became henotheistic. The word henotheistic means to have a hierarchy. Like a podium at the Olympics. God was number one, the Lord was number one, but Baal was on number two. He had like a silver medal. And underneath him was Asherah. That was the bronze level. They worshiped both. But did you notice what the first command says? It doesn't say, I want to be first among other gods. What does it say? To have no other gods. Have no other gods. I don't want any other gods. I don't want to compete with any gods. I want to be the one and only. Now, from where I stand, you would think this would be pretty common sense. Choose the Lord or choose, Baal, whatever God you choose. Like, just choose one. That would make sense. But yet, I hear more and more Christians who read their Bibles and their horoscopes right next to each other. And if you want to obey the first command, the Lord doesn't want to share your heart with your horoscope. I've heard people say, well, I'm like the way I am because I'm a zodiac. I'm a Cancer. I'm a Aries. The Lord doesn't want to share your heart with your sign. What's really trendy now is this little dot people put at their homes, the evil eye. And they think to themselves, oh, I don't know if it keeps away evil spirits. Who knows what the Amazon worker is doing when he drops off the packages? You know what I mean? I just got to keep them away. But the Lord doesn't want to give a piece of your heart and your need and our need for security and protection to the evil eye. And hey, I have a lot of dear Catholic friends, and I bless the Catholic tradition. They are part of the Christian stream of thought if they believe in Jesus. But as good as St. Peter is, and St. Thomas, and St. John of the Cross, and St. Ignatia, and St. Teresa of Avila, and I've read biographies of all those saints, and I adore them myself because they are people of faith. The Lord doesn't want you to pray to them. He wants you to pray to him. The Lord didn't want to share his heart. He wants us to worship him and him alone. See, this story, family, is not a story of a confrontation between Elijah, Jezebel, and Ahab. It's a confrontation between the Lord and Baal. And who will we actually worship? Who will Israel worship? Who will get his worship? So Elijah draws the people over. He summons them, and he says to them, how long, verse 20, will you waver between two opinions? Everyone say waver with me. Oh, 11 o'clock. That was so bad. Come on. Waver. Okay, that's a little better. Okay, I want you to think of this. How long will you waver between two opinions, he says. If the Lord is God, worship him, follow him, be his disciple. If Baal is God, be his disciple, worship him. Elijah hoped this competition would be very simple. The Lord was already up 1-0 because the God of thunder didn't produce any rain since the Lord caused the drought. It's 1-0. The Lord is up right now. And Elijah hopes they'll say, you're right, we haven't had rain for 3 years, we're going with the Lord. But the people are indecisive. They waver between the two. The word waver in the Hebrew is a picture of a tree branch. I got some tree branches in my backyard. I got a little tree. The tree branches never grow straight. They're always going left and right, and that's a picture of Israel's heart. They were going left and right, wavering between the two. Baal or the Lord? Baal or the Lord? Who would they choose? Now, does anyone find this hard to relate to? Do you find this conversation about idolatry and statues and false gods hard to relate to? Because I just want you to know, I don't struggle with bowing down to statues. I don't know about you, but I don't wake up in the morning and think to myself, gosh, I really want to pray to the moon today. Oh, do you? You wake up like, oh, the sun is brilliant. I think I will put on some Chris Tomlin and sing to the sun. No? Anybody? No? I don't either. You know what I mean? This is kind of a weird conversation. Idolatry and statues, it all kind of feels a little outdated. It feels a little old. And so let me just kind of simplify this for everybody for a moment. Idolatry, don't think about it in terms of statues. They're not statues. Idolatry in the modern age has nothing to do with statues. It has everything to do with unseen, powerful influences on your priorities and on your heart. An idol is anything or anyone that takes the place of God as the number one priority in your life. It is anything or anyone that takes the place of God in our life. And idols are sneaky to identify. They're hard to see. I was in India one time, and they couldn't believe that if they drank the water they bathed in, they would get sick. They couldn't believe that in that water was a little invisible bacteria that if they drank it, they'd get ill. Idols are like that bacteria. If you have idols in your life, it'll affect you. It'll affect your walk with God. See, idols are actually everywhere, and you can make them into everything or anything at all. The four most common idols are the idol of control, the idol of power, the idol of approval, and the idol of pleasure. But you and I can make idols of anything. One person at 9 o'clock service said, that's all I needed. That's all, the whole sermon came down to those 4 things right there. Like, that's it. That's all I need right there. So I thought maybe we could step into somebody and their reality and their experience of struggling with some of these idols before we continue. Let's talk about me for a moment. Because as a dad, I see the idolatry in my heart come up when my kids don't get A+, they get the B+. And the idol of fear and control comes in my heart, and I start thinking to myself, what if they don't get into USC? What if they have to go to that other school with the bear, the little teddy bear? What's that thing? What's that school called? What? Oh, UCLA. Yeah, sorry. I had a few people say, hey, throwing some curveballs at us today, Aaron, right? What if my kids don't get straight A's? What if they don't make the team I want them to make? What if they don't do what I want them to do? All this idolatry of fear can come over my heart as a dad. Parents, am I the only one? Yeah, right, it's true that we get, as a pastor, I have the idol of approval in my life. I have to really do hard work. When I hear y'all say, man, that pastor across town, or that pastor across the country, or that pastor across the world that I listen to on YouTube, their sermons are so relevant and so good. I go, I just want my messages to make an impact. And hey, God bless. Great content out there and availability. I love that. You keep listening to the people that God uses to stir you to follow Jesus. That is wonderful. It is my issue, not yours. That's a good thing. Or the idol of comfort. After a long day, you just want to come home and you start scrolling on this thing. Or am I the only one whose thumb has ever hurt because I was on it too much? Right? Idols are everywhere. And there's nothing wrong with being on your phone. I just want you to know that. There's nothing wrong with having expectations for our kids. There's nothing wrong with wanting your work to make an impact on someone's life, as long as we do it in a righteous way. But it was John Calvin who said this, and I love this quote: the evil in our desires typically does not lie in what we want, but that we want it too much. What idols are tempting you? See, what I found that when we identify them, when we see them, what we have to do is actually take the idols that are in our life and then break it. Take it and break it. It's kind of fun to do. Take it and break the idols. Identifying idols in our life takes hard, humble heart work. You may leave here today and go, okay, he gave me something to think about, but I don't quite know what my idols are, because it does take time. It kind of sinks in, into the soil of our heart. But when you find an idol, you take it and you break it. I want you to think about a campsite. Maybe you like camping, maybe you don't, I don't know. Some people love it or hate it, just two sides to that hobby. Picture yourself at a campsite, and there's a beautiful stream that goes through your campsite. And in case you hate camping, just picture it, there's no mosquitoes anywhere, okay? And you wake up the first day, and you're having a great day, you have your coffee in your hand, and you go to the stream that was over on the side, and there in it is a bunch of trash that came down from the very top part of the stream. There's milk cartons and coffee cans, and there's dirty diapers and the flies, and you pick up all the litter and you put it in a trash can. The next day it appears again. It comes from upstream all the way down. The third day it appears again. The fourth day it appears again. And on the fifth day you finally say, you know what? We got to stop it. And the only way to get rid of that trash is to hike upstream and to put a stop to it at the source. And what if I told you that the problems that we face, that the temptations that are in our lives, that the sins that we struggle with, what if I told you that the only way to put an end to some of those is not to just kind of deal with it in the moment and the behavior of it, but to actually go upstream in your heart and take a hold of it and end it at the source? And the source is an idol. What if I told you that we had to hike upstream and say, that's the source of it, because no amount of behavior modification is going to get rid of our idols? Consider what might be at the source of overusing this. I think the average American is now on this 6 hours a day. What could be at the root of this for us? What could be at the root of credit card debt? What could be at the root of expectations on a spouse that are way too high? What could be at the root of chasing trophies and awards? Because if you find them, you might find an idol, and you might need to take it and break it. The idol of power and the idol of fear is in full force in this political season right now. I know that that word politics makes our blood rush and thoughts go through our mind, and it's a nuanced conversation. Can I just ask you as your pastor if you would let me, I can't demand it from you, but allow me to shepherd you in this season through this? I can't demand it, but I just want to ask you if I could help your soul in this season. It's going to be crazy, as it already is. If I could just give you this little tidbit right now, the idol of power and the idol of fear, if you allow that in your life, your hope, your joy, and your peace will rise and fall depending on the headline that you read that day. And so that's why Jesus only wants his power to be the one that exists in our heart, because he's on the throne. And when he's on the throne in our hearts and our faith, our hope and our joy does not go with the headline, it goes with Jesus Christ on the throne. That's all I have for you today on that one, okay? But I would love to continue to just pastor us through this season. Identifying idols is helpful. When you find it, take it and break it. But why is it so hard to let them go? I don't know about you, but when I found idols, they kind of stick to your soul. And in fact, the Bible teaches that it's impossible for us to let them go if it were not for the intervention of the Holy Spirit. And so the Lord intervenes in the situation for his people because they're wavering between the two, and he sets up a competition, an epic competition between Baal and the Lord. And the winner of it is going to be the one that people give their worship. So Elijah calls everybody over in verse 23. He says this, "Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood and not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call in the name of your God, and I will call in the name of the Lord. And the God who answers by fire, he is God." And the people said, "What you say is good." Do you remember having a crush in elementary school? And you would do anything to get their attention. You know, you would dress a certain way. You would pass a note and risk getting in trouble. You do something on the playground to try to just get their attention. This is the Lord trying to win over the hearts of his people. It's a young man going after the heart of a woman and to get to know her. And so the prophets of Baal begin their quest to try to get Baal's attention. And they begin to set up these idols or this altar. They put these stones on there. They begin to pray to Baal. "Baal, Baal," they shout. The passage says no one responded, no one answered. So they started to dance and get jiggy with it. Just as silly as I looked, they would look even sillier. And Elijah saw how silly they looked on the altar, and he began to mock them. He says to them, "Surely he's a god," sarcasm. "Perhaps he's in deep thought or he's busy. Maybe he's traveling right now. Maybe he's sleeping." Literally, the Hebrew says, maybe he's on the toilet, okay? Tensions reach their climax. The prophets of Baal shout louder, "Baal, Baal," they shout. They even pull out knives. They cut themselves, trying to get his attention. This is getting ridiculous and wild. And the saddest verse of the whole passage. Pay attention to this, church. This is so important. But there was no response. No one answered, and no one paid attention. Idols will always let you down. Idols will always let us down. They will use you and then let you down. My wife and I went to Las Vegas for our anniversary trip. And I'm not proud of that. Okay. We had some plans that we had originally for our 15th anniversary get canceled because of a death in the family. We had to scramble, and I've never actually been there as an adult, just want you to know that. And got a hotel there and went, and we don't gamble. I didn't gamble. We don't drink. We don't like any of that kind of stuff. We are very boring people, I'm sorry. I sat around the pool reading books about preaching, and I sent both of you guys a text message about that just to be as nerdy as possible. Vegas is just full of idols. There's idols everywhere. The idol of sex, the idol of pleasure, the idol of pluralism. You just do you, whatever you want, whatever brings you your pleasure. You get to do that here, everybody. And when you go to Vegas, I pray for you. I don't need to know your business. But when I hear people, "I'm going to Vegas," I pray for you. Because that place is an idol maker. And because there's so many idols there, we had to live carefully on vacation. Well, I was walking down the street, and we had just left the Bellagio and the beautiful light show, and we're all stoked because we just heard Frank Sinatra, and it was great if you've been there. And we're walking back, and I look in a hotel. through the glass window, and there's a woman there about maybe in her 70s, a little older lady, and she was crouching over her chair. It was very clear to me that she had lost all her money. That slot machine just took and took and took and took and took everything that she had, not just her money, but her soul. It took her joy, it took her hope, it took her life away. And that is what an idol will do. If you give in to an idol over and over and over and over again, it just takes and takes and takes, like, give me more. There's like a slot machine, and it will never pay out back to you at all. It'll use you and use you and use you and use you. No one answered, no one responded, no one paid attention. That's how idols treat people. They will use you. But the Lord, check this out, church, he will pursue you. Look down. Look at what Elijah says. He says this, verse 27, or verse 30. He said to all the people, come here to me. Sounds like Jesus, doesn't it? Because Elijah has a spirit kind of like Jesus. Come here to me. And there was a reverence that came over the people, and the people began to feel a longing. We have to return to the Lord, they thought. We have to come back to him. And so Elijah set up an altar, 12 stones to represent the 12 tribes of Israel. And he said, I'm doing this so that you will remember that you are Israel. And by reminding them of their identity, they would be remembered of God's faithfulness. Israelites would remember the stories of God's promises that he's kept and made. And they would remember that God had freed them from slavery to Egypt. And the people would have thought to themselves, oh my gosh, we are slaves again, but now in our own land. We are slaves to Baal. We are slaves in our own homeland now. What are we doing? We must come back to God. There is a sense of faith growing in the people. And then Elijah says, give me 4 jugs of water, please. They bring him 4 jugs. He pours it on the altar 3 different times, 4 jugs. What does that add up to, students? 12 or 12. 4 times 3, 12. 12 times. He pours water on the altar to represent the 12 tribes of Israel. He is saying to the people, the Lord wants you. He wants you. You're his people, he's saying to them. And then Elijah prays, and here's what he prays. Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord. Answer me, so that these people will know, Lord, that you are God and that you are turning their hearts back again. The prize is your heart. He's after your worship. Lord, would this be done so that they will know that you are God alone? It's a righteous prayer. And then the fire came. Sounded better than that in real life, I imagine, right? The fire came, and this wasn't just like a moment of like, oh, that was cool, like fireworks. No, that was intentional by God. He did it to prove that he was God alone. Remember, Baal is the god of thunder and lightning. What does thunder and lightning produce when it strikes? Fire. And the God of thunder and lightning couldn't produce fire. But the God of the Bible, the Lord God, could. He could. But that isn't the miracle. The miracle is what happens to the altar. Look down with me. It says this, the fire licked up all the wood, burned up all the wood and the soil, and licked up all the water in the trench. This is the Lord forgiving his people. See, that altar was an offering for their sin. The people brought nothing but their sin and their idolatry, and the Lord provided the sacrifice. He provided the consummation of the sacrifice, meaning that he forgave them. This is a picture of the gospel in this moment. See, the gospel says that you don't bring anything to God. You don't bring righteousness. You don't bring your good deeds. It's all, tainted with all motives. We don't bring anything to God except for our sin and our idolatry. But the Lord, he provides the sacrifice. He provides Jesus. He provided Jesus so that we could be forgiven of our sin. He's the only one that can do that. Your credit cards can't. Your fit check cannot, right? Your appearance, your job, your paycheck, nothing can forgive you of your sin. The Lord shows us that he is God alone simply by what he did on the cross and that empty tomb. So how does the Lord win your worship alone? By demonstrating he is God alone. Only God can forgive sins. Only Jesus can do that. So I was reading about how builders used to take down buildings, and you guys who are in construction know this better than I do in the history of it. But buildings, they used to be taken down by big wrecking balls, slamming up against the outside of the building. And they realized a more effective way of taking down a building was to implode it with explosives. Makes sense. And I've seen many people's lives implode. Christians' lives. Pastors on stages that I look up to implode. I've seen hardworking people. I've seen God-fearing people implode. I've seen people who've been married 50 years and 1 year implode. I've seen students at Christian high schools and Christian schools and students at public schools implode. I've seen people that have a great family implode. I've seen hard workers, people who pay their taxes implode. I have seen good Americans implode, all because they allowed an idol to get inside their life. And it imploded them. Because they allowed that idol to exist right next to Jesus Christ in their life. So if we're serious about worshiping Jesus alone, what do we got to do? Well, we have to be like Michael Jordan. Now, Michael Jordan is probably the last person you and I should go to for advice on idolatry. I mean, Jumpman, everybody, right? That's kind of like a symbol. But Michael Jordan, 1990s, went over to his friend's house named Fred Whitaker. He worked for the NBA office. And they were going to go get dinner that night, and Jordan forgot his jacket. He said, I need a jacket. And so he said, well, there's one in my closet in my bedroom. So Jordan went to go get a jacket from Fred's closet, and he saw in there a bunch of shirts and jackets and shoes made by Puma. And right next to all those shirts and jackets and shoes made by Puma were shirts, jackets, and shoes made by his sponsor, Nike. And Jordan was really upset. He was infuriated. So he took the shirts off and the jackets off, made by Puma. And he got scissors, and he began to cut them all up into shreds and pieces until it was one big, giant pile. And then he took that over to Fred and dropped it in front of him. He said, Fred, I don't ever want to see you wear Puma again. Call my agent, we'll replace it all with Nike. And then he said this, from now on, you cannot be on the fence. You cannot be on the fence. Family, you can't be on the fence with God. You can't be on the fence with God. And so what idols exist in your heart right now? What idols might exist in the closet of your heart right next to Jesus? What idols might exist there that you need to take down, and you might need to take your scissors, and let's see if this works. It does not. It doesn't always go the way you planned it. But you know what I mean. What idols do you need to cut up? I wish I was like Hulk Hogan. I could just rip it open, right? And get rid of, so that Jesus and Jesus alone is the one who gets the worship of your life. Someone will ask, well, what happens when I do? Good question. What happens when I get rid of the idols in my life and I drop them and I get rid of them? I go upstream, I get rid of them in my life. What happens when I do that? Here's what will happen. You will find it easier to obey God. You'll find it easier to obey him because Martin Luther, he said this, you cannot disobey the last 9 commandments without first disobeying the first commandment. And if that is true, which I think it is, in other words, then the reverse is true, which means that you cannot, if you obey the first commandment, you will also find it easier to obey the last 9. Did our lights just go out? Oh, there we go. Thank you, guys. The guys in the back were like, oh, no. Something just happened. Like deers in the headlight, bro. I love you guys. So it's easier for us to obey God when we also obey the first commandment altogether. Which idols exist in your life? Now, here's the thing, family. Last thing. You can't just reject an idol. You have to replace an idol. You have to replace an idol with worshiping Jesus. That's it. You can't just say no to an idol. You have to say yes to him. Can't reject an idol. Have to replace an idol. Tim Keller, he said this. The secret to freedom and enslaving pattern of sin is worship. You need worship. You need great worship. You need weeping worship. You need glorious worship. You need a sense of God's greatness and be moved by it, moved by who God is and what he has done for you. What idols in your life are on the closet of your heart that you need to tear down, go upstream, take it, and break it with worship? And then decide which God will you worship alone. God, thank you for this morning. Thank you for this powerful passage about idolatry in our life. And thank you, Jesus, that you have promised to set us free. And Lord, that there are things in our life that are holding us down, that are problems that we are facing, that are temptations that we regularly struggle with. All of us in this room. And yet, Lord, you want to be the one and only. You said in your word, worship me alone. Have no other gods before me. God, would you expose any idols in our life that may stand in the way of you? And would you take our hearts, as Elijah said, you are turning our hearts back to you. With our heads bowed and eyes closed this morning, family, I just want to ask you if you would just allow me to pray for people in this room who feel like God is speaking to them about this. And if you would just raise your hand, just put it up and let me know this is speaking to me. This is something that I need to wrestle with. I see hands. Thank you. God bless you. Yeah, just heads bowed. Yeah, all around. Thank you. Thank you. Last service, we had 90% of our church just say, yeah, like our church, just, yes, I need this. And I just want to pray for you. Thank you for raising your hand. God, for people raising their hand right now who recognize